Hi, I'm going to do my best to read this book that I love. It's called When Lightning Comes in a Jar by Patricia Polacco. When Lightning Comes in a Jar by Patricia Polacco. Today is my family reunion. I can hardly wait. My dad's side of the family will come soon. It's been ages since I've seen them all. Before, our reunions were always at my grandma's house, but this year it's going to be at mine. I'm so anxious to see my cousins, especially Lydia and Sandy. They'll be wearing the same colors that we always wore at the family reunions. They wore them at our last reunion. How I remember that day. Grandma and I stood in her front window, waiting for my relatives to come. "I can't wait to see them all," I said to her. "I know," she said. "Will there be Jell-O like there always is?" I asked. "Yes," she answered. "And baseball and croquet like there always is?" "And bag races, too." "And will you tell stories like you always do?" "Might," Grandma said, looking up at the sky. "And we might catch lightning in a jar." "Lightning in a jar?" I asked. This was new. And then my relatives started driving up by the carload, one after another. Finally, the car I was waiting for rolled up and my 5 cousins piled out: Sandy, Freddie, Billy, Lydia, and Carl. Sandy, Lydia, and I squealed and ran for the porch swing, just like we always did. We held hands and pushed the swing with our bare feet. We told secrets that we had kept for a whole year. I told them about lightning in a jar. When my dad called out, "Who's going to help unload these baskets from the car?" we shouted, "We will!" And we lugged baskets full and heavy to the tables in the maple grove. "Wonder how many Jell-O salads there'll be," my cousin Freddie asked. "Gazillions! There always are," my cousin Billy answered, and sure enough, there were gazillions. They jumped and shook every time we bumped the table. They seemed alive. "Bet there'll be as many meatloafs, too," my brother chimed in. And there were, as we unpacked them, zillions of meatloafs. They were all different, too. Each auntie had her own recipe, including Aunt Bertha, who made one that had a hard-boiled egg in the middle. When we cut it, there was a perfect slice of egg, like a giant eye. Our aunties and Grandma flitted around the tables like butterflies, going from flower to flower. They perked up the lettuces or rearranged the tomatoes and set slices of meatloaf so they looked perfect. When Grandma and the aunties took off their aprons, we all knew it was time to gather at the table. We all held hands. Uncle Wayland said the blessing. Then everyone sat down and dove into the food, piling it high on their plates, some as high as haystacks. My brother Richie was sitting with some older girls that came with our older cousins. He was acting silly. I could tell he liked one of them. Embarrassing. When we thought we couldn't eat any more, Grandma and my aunties put their aprons back on and started getting all of the pies and cakes from the kitchen. There was something magical about my grandma and her sisters this day, like they knew something they weren't telling. I did wonder how Grandma was going to catch lightning in a jar, and every so often I'd stop her and ask her how. She'd just smile and say, "Easy. Someday you'll do it too." After we ate, it was time for our annual baseball game. My dad and uncles against us kids. "Batter up," my dad called out as my cousin Billy stepped up to home plate. Lucky he was on our team. He could hit anything. When he was out of field, he could leap in the air and make impossible catches. "That kid can jump higher than a cow's back," our uncles used to say. First pitch out, Billy hit the ball so hard it clean disappeared. We thought we saw lightning as it hit the sky. Maybe the lightning was on its way. Was that what Grandma was going to catch in a jar? I'm going to be a Detroit Tiger someday, Billy said that day, and we all knew that he most certainly would. Now it was time for croquet, the biggest game of the day, which our uncles kept interrupting with friendly quarrels about bent hoops, crooked wickets, and wanting to take reshots. We had bag races, watermelon seed spitting contests, and rides on Grandpa's draft horse, until Grandpa waved a yardstick in the air. All of us kids dropped what we were doing and ran to the milk shed. We knew it was time to get measured. We did this every year. I liked looking at the marks of my grandma and her sisters and brothers on that same doorway, some shorter than mine. Hard to imagine that once they were little, just like me. Aunt Bertha had gone to the house and fetched all the family portrait albums. The aunties showed us the old brown photos and pointed. That was their father, who saved souls as a circuit preacher when he wasn't farming. Look, there were their favorite horses. Their eyes sparkled when they showed us their wedding pictures. The aunties were all married in their mother's parlor. I watched Grandma to see if she would summon lightning from the sky. It's time for the family photo, Auntie Iva called as she jumped up and grabbed the camera. We kids didn't like this part because it meant that the dirt on our faces would be scraped off with a hanky that our aunties had spit on, especially mine. Everybody smile, Auntie Iva sang out. After this, the kids started to chant, "Stories, stories, stories, please!" Grandma and her sisters and brothers started quiet and slow. Uncle Ernest told us about milking cows faster than lightning. Grandma told about how she and her sisters walked 7 miles to a one-room schoolhouse over in Lock Center, and how each one of them taught in that same school. Then there was some quiet as Aunt Iva started fanning herself. We knew she was getting ready. I remember the day I was driving the rig home from school when I came upon a real rattlesnake. We all looked at one another. Rattlers weren't around these parts, so we knew this was going to be good. That thing was all coiled up and shaking its tail. Not a rattling sound, something more like a loud buzz. Bill the horse just stood there and shook. "What'd you do, Aunt Iva?" we asked. "Well, sir, I stepped out of the buggy, took my umbrella, and put it smack in the middle of that snake, all coiled up. It just wrapped around that umbrella. I knew if it struck me, I was a goner." We all leaned forward. "So I picked it up, gave the umbrella a sharp jerk, and flung that snake into Cecil Potter's field. Then I jumped into my buggy and galloped home, like the wind." All of my aunts and uncles laughed. And then a flicker of heat lightning sprang up on the horizon. The air didn't move. Was something magic going to happen? Aunt Ida fluttered her fan. Oh, we knew she was getting ready to top Aunt Iva's story. Have I ever told you children about the time I took a ride in the first newfangled motor car in this here county? No, we kids sang out. Well, sir, it began with it belonged to L.D. Dunkel. My pa didn't approve of him. No, never. He is a wild kid, he raved. Don't never want you to see the likes of him. Then one day I was walking home from the prayer meeting. He rolled right up next to me, driving the shiniest machine I'd ever seen. Aunt Ada stopped and fanned herself some more. "What happened, Aunt Ada?" we begged. "Well," Aunt Ada crowed, "I climbed right into that thing. L.D. shifted that contraption, making a terrible sound, and the roadster almost leapt right out from under us. It went so fast my hat blew clean off. We were going almost 40 miles an hour. We raced up Moyer Road, hurtled across Evie Peters' barn, and almost flattened the Bender sisters' fruit stand, and then howled down Dietz Road." We gasped. And then we skidded to a stop in front of Pa's barn, and there he was, just a-standing there. She stopped again and fanned herself. "What'd he do, Aunt Ada? What happened?" we all pleaded. Not a blessed thing, she answered, and she laughed so hard that she almost dropped her lemonade. Heat lightning flickered again. There was a low rumble of thunder off in the distance. Now I watched my grandmother. She smiled and gave a wink. It was her turn. Well, sir, Grandma began, I was but a girl out plowing, helping Pa at the fields. His team could plow those rows straight as an arrow. And when his team reared and bolted and dragged me halfway down the field before I could free myself, when I stood up, there was a fierce and clattering roar in the sky above me. We all leaned toward her. It was like thunder and fierce lightning. She stopped and sipped her lemonade. What was it, Grandma? The kids begged. I looked up, waiting for the lightning. Well, sir, I couldn't believe what I was seeing above me. And we crawled close to her knee. There, like a giant dragonfly with 2 sets of wings, growling and roaring and pitching and rolling and spewing foul-smelling smoke. We leaned forward. It was the first ever flying machine in the state of Michigan. We all clapped with delight. That would have been a perfect time for lightning to come, but it didn't. And it was almost dark. I whispered to Grandma, what about lightning in the jar? She adjusted her glasses and gave me a look. Have the last rays of sun left the grass? She asked. I looked real hard. Yes, I said. Then sit down, child. Aunt Bertha brought a wicker laundry basket full of glass canning jars and set them at Grandma's feet. Many years ago, when your aunties and uncles and I were but children, our grandpa showed us what I'm about to show you. She leaned down and touched the grass, cupping something in her hands. She thought for a moment and then said, shadows lengthen, the day near done. Birds fly low with the setting sun. Stars will rise from the earth below. In these hands their light will glow. Come up, lightning, come up, stars. I'll snatch you up in these here jars. She blew into her hands and let something go. It flew for a moment, then landed deep in the grass. We watched and waited, but nothing was happening. Low thunder rumbled just above us. Look, my cousin Billy called out. A small burst of starlight puffed up out of the grass. Then more and more drifted up out of the carpet of lawn beneath our feet. Fireflies, we all called out, and we grabbed the jars, and the dash was on to capture lightning and put it in a jar. Grandma gave me a knowing look and smiled. When everyone had gone home that night, Grandma and I sat on the porch swing together. We looked at that flickering jar, even though I knew fireflies are common in Michigan on summer nights. Never had I seen so many as that night. And as long as I live, I'll believe that somehow Grandma called them up with her stories and her magic. That night seems so long ago. But the reunion is here again. My family is arriving. Now, my heart is racing. We'll eat scrumptious jello and meatloaf. Play baseball and croquet, spit watermelon seeds, and scrawl new measurements on my milk house door jamb. We'll look at the photo albums. We'll laugh at some and cry at others. We'll remember the stories, how Grandma saw the first flying machine, and Aunt Iva conquered the rattler. We'll talk about Billy and how he should have been a Detroit Tiger, but he gave his life for his country in a war far away. Then, when the sun is low and the shadows are long, we'll all sit and fan ourselves in the shade of the maple trees. Only a new crop of children will gather at our knees. My father, my grandmother, my aunts and uncles are no longer here. So now it is we who must tell their stories and bring them back for fleeting moments. Then I will show the children the magic that my grandma showed me. I'll call the stars from beneath their feet, And as they rise in the warm night air, these children will leap as high as a cow's back to gather them up. I'll send them home with full bellies, tired bones, and flickering jars in their laps. Their hearts will be overflowing, full of lightning put there by folks who loved them even before they were born. Grandma knew this well. She also knew that they would someday tell their children about all of us and the magic nights when we caught lightning in a jar. That's it.